district and with the technical advisor to assist the district. So I can't say that it would be every week or every month.
But the technical advisor is still in place and will still be in place during this implementation process?
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Under Exhibit C13, day 418, 419, do you have any knowledge of who asked the State Department to leave the district?
I was not present on that visit. I believe we will have additional witnesses that will have more direct knowledge about the teams and the events of any follow-up visits. I was not present at that time.
Yes, I have one more question. What happens if JPS does not meet deadlines that are set by the Commission on Accreditation? If we would extend the timeline today, what happens to the State Department of Education, and how does that relate to other school districts in the state of Mississippi in the event that they do not meet their timeline? David, have you done?
For this particular non-compliance?
Right. Tell me, sometimes January, February you submit a report each year, and it's only a year later.
Yes.
But by the time that it's vetted, so to speak, by the United States Department of Education, and it gets back to Mississippi, when it gets back, if it hasn't been corrected by them, what effect does it have on the state of Mississippi, on the Mississippi Department of Education, and on federal program special education in the state of Mississippi?
The Office of Special Education could determine that the state is in need of assistance.
That's U.S.
And they could provide technical assistance to the state if there are policies and procedures that the state needs to address. We could be sanctioned as far as having our official designation negatively impacted. The state has had a clean record for 3 consecutive years as it meets requirements with all federal requirements. We've never gone down this road before. We had one other instance only several years ago for one district that did not meet the 12-month timeline. But in that particular case, we were able to address those issues shortly after the 12-month timeline, and were able to get all of those issues resolved with the district before it affected the state's determination. So the state has never received a negative impact like this before.
Thank you.
I have just one more follow-up question, Mr. Thompson. You said you've recently received a report from Jackson Public Schools, when will you know whether the results that are contained in that report?
Are you talking about the follow-up visit report for the follow-up visit that was conducted last week?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure how quickly that we will be able to issue a final report, since the team just went last week, and at this point we just have a very rough draft of the information collected during that visit.
Okay. I recall at our meeting in March, you mentioned something about a report being that would be submitted before this hearing. And I take it that this is the report you were referring to?
No, ma'am, that was a separate report. That was a response from the district that would indicate the steps they were taking to implement corrective actions to resolve the noncompliance. So that report was used as part of the follow-up visit last week to see if we had evidence of that being implemented, of all of that information being implemented at the school level.
Okay, thank you.
Would there be any chance to narrow in on a date when you might have that report?
Well, I'm sure we would be able to get a final report very quickly. I just can't say if it'll be in 5 days or 10 days. We have to be very thorough in reviewing all the data collected during the visit to be sure that everything that we're going to put in that report is accurate based on the data collected. So we're dealing with a lot of specific data that has to be put into a formal report.
Would 30 days be unreasonable?
No, sir.
So within 30 days, we might be able to see that. You think that would be reasonable?
Yes, sir.
There are no other questions from
Yeah,
the
what is the latest date that you can present to the U.S. Department evidence of the implementation, assuming JPS gets it done? What is the latest date you can present it to the U.S. Department to prevent any sanctions towards us?
That would be in the spring, summer, and fall of 2013.
Okay,
But those issues would be addressed then. The report is filed in February each year. States are given a clarification week after the initial review at the federal level. That usually occurs in late March or early April. And then the final report from the Office of Special Education is not issued until June. So we would get any notification of any sanctions to the district in June of sanctions to the state in June of 2013. And then we would have to respond to that.
If JPS gets these deficiencies corrected before then, and you have evidence of that, and your office is satisfied, we can present that and prevent it. Okay.
Now, I'm not sure if that will prevent any sanctions with the state, but it would certainly be part of the information they consider.
Just to clarify, I'm not sure I'm going to have to ask Ms. Manford, but when was the first date that JPS was notified of these 23.3 deficiencies?
They received the initial findings and decision in November 2010.
Any further questions?
I want to ask. I noticed in your report you said that a team, the Fluency Plus, was working with the Jackson Public School.
Yes.
And the findings that they were trying to correct. How long does that team stay there or work with the school district?
It just depends on the activity.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Is there a defined timeline in the improvement plan?
There have been defined timelines in the improvement plan, yes, that there have been. Those timelines have not been met as far as being able to document full implementation to verify compliance.
The timeline has not been met to verify implementation. The timeline has not been met by Jackson Public Schools, or just because the process takes time and it's hard to define?
The process takes time, and then you had the initial findings and decision, timelines were set. At that point, those timelines were not met. Follow-up visits were conducted, timelines were set, and those were not met. It's not that the district is not doing anything to address these issues. As I said, they have revised policies They've revised procedures. They've done massive training. But that's all at the upper level. What has to be in evidence is at the lowest level, at the schools, implemented by the administrators and the teachers, and the evidence in the records of the students.
Okay, I'm sorry to belabor this, but I'm not in government, but I've worked with government for many years. And I understand that government is very different than the private sector. But what I'm having a hard time getting my arms around is we have an issue, complaints that have been filed, timelines that have been established. And I understand that it's sort of like swimming in jello, if I'm making the statement correct. Every time you push down in one place, it pushes up somewhere else. How do you address making sure that the timelines that are set out are met, knowing that the process involves shifting sand, so to speak? That every time you do something here, something else happens there. Is this something your office does? Is this something Jackson Public Schools does? So my question boiled down to simplicity is, who is responsible for establishing a timeline and monitoring that those are met so that by the time February comes around, you have to issue this report, we can know that all that has been able to be done can be done. Who's responsible for that?
Well, ultimately, the state is responsible.
Would that be your office?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But the state is responsible, if I understand what you're saying, is the state is responsible for submitting a report to Washington. But the individual school district is responsible for meeting the timeline that's set by or either agreed upon.
Yes, sir.
And probably there's some length of time that you can give a school district. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, is any consideration given to the fact that you have about 30,000 students in the Jackson Public Schools, and probably 20 to at least 15 to 20% of those students are in some kind of special education services?
Not under the federal regulations, no, sir. Every individual student,
Its own percentages, but it doesn't make any difference. You got to respond to each individual. Right?
each individual case, and
Okay.
each individual student, yes, sir.
Let me just follow up with this improvement plan to make sure that we're all on the same page with it. The district devises an improvement plan once they have the report, right? Timelines are set. And the State Department monitors whether those timelines are kept.
Yes, we provide the technical assistance to help them implement those corrective actions, and we provide follow-up visits to see how the district is progressing.
Okay, now between the timeline, this improvement plan that was submitted in December of 2010, and the discussion of the improvement plan, and I imagine the subsequent implementation of this improvement plan, and the visits by the technical assistant to monitor the improvement plan. What happened when the benchmarks weren't being met?
Well, we continue to work with the district.
And continue to monitor the benchmarks. And then after the year, none of the benchmarks have been met. Is that what we're hearing? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Any further questions? Mr. Moore?
I have one more that I'm interested in. On Exhibit 9, C9, if I read that correctly, or you tell me, does that mean that substantial compliance by the state, by us, that we meet substantial compliance if we're in the 95% range? Is that correct?
On the 20 indicators, there are 20 indicators. Each indicator stands alone. And some of those indicators are compliance issues, like indicator 15, general supervision is a compliance indicator. Indicator 3 is a results indicator where we are reporting data and how the state is progressing on that indicator. So it's a combination of results and compliance standards. And OSEP has a rubric that they use to rate those indicators, yes.
Okay, so this particular situation could affect more than one of those indicators.
It could affect more than one indicator, yes. Other than the general supervision, another indicator it could affect would be the disproportionality indicator of students with disabilities who may have been suspended at a greater rate than students without disabilities.
Any further questions? Anything more, believe you are free to step down. Unless Ms. Butler or Mr. Keith have any follow-up questions. Ms. Deep or Ms. Butler, you have to call your next witness.
Did anybody want any other questions from Dr. Vanderwood?
Right. Did the commission members have any questions for any of the prior witnesses who testified to stand in front of us? No? Okay. Call your next witness.
The department calls Tanya Bradley.
Did someone get Ms. Bradley?
Hello, Ms. Bradley. Will you please state your name for the commission?
Tanya Bradley,
And who is your employer?
Mississippi Department of Education, Office of Special Ed,
What is your job title?
Bureau Director 2.
And just briefly, as a bureau director, to what departments are you over or supervise?
I have responsibility for 2 divisions in the Office of Special Education, the Division of Technical Assistance and the Division of Monitoring.
And how long have you been a bureau director to the Department of Education?
For 8 years.
And when the Department of Education receives a complaint against the school district for a special education violation, when does your office get involved?
My office gets involved almost immediately after receipt of a parent complaint or a state assisting a complaint that is received in the Division of Parent Outreach. There is a process where we meet collaboratively with staff in that office and review each of the complaints as they are received.
And after that collaborative meeting, what is determined?
We make a determination as to whether or not an on-site investigation would need to be carried out or conducted in the district.
And after a complaint's received by the Department of Education and your office investigates, if your office determines that there is non-compliance with federal regulations, how long does the law allow the district to resolve those issues and come into compliance?
The district is required to correct all identified non-compliance as soon as possible, but in no case later than 12 months from the date of identification.
And do you know where in the law that is found?
300.600.
Is that the Code of Federal Regulations and also our State Board policy? Which
Yes, 34 CFR as well as State Board Policy 7219.
And when does that one-year timeline begin to run against the district?
The one-year timeline begins on the date that the office issues the findings and decision or the report.
And did your office investigate the September 8th, 2010 systematic complaint that was filed against Jackson Public School District? Yes. And is the failure to resolve these issues raised by the September 8th, 2010 complaint part of the basis of the non-compliance with state and federal requirements for special ed programs?
Yes.
And when did the Department of Education issue its findings and decision regarding the September 8th, 2010 complaint?
Our findings and decision were rendered or issued on November 22nd, 2010.
And is that letter and report found at Exhibit C-17?
Are you referring to when we issued the November 22nd, 2010 report?
Yes.
Not C-17.
C-18, I apologize.
Yes, Exhibit C-18.
And when was that one-year timeline deadline?
The one-year deadline would have been November 22nd, 2011.
And what was supposed to have occurred by November 22nd, 2010?
All identified areas of noncompliance were to be corrected and resolved.
And were they?
No.
Is that what is found in the November 22nd, 2000? Sorry. Look at C-17.
Okay.
And is that the report for the follow-up visit?
Yes. Exhibit C-17 dated January 13, 2012 would be the report and the cover letter as a result of the last follow-up visit that would have been within that one-year timeline.
Is that the letter that advises the district that they weren't in compliance within the one-year timeline?
Yes.
And who is that January 13th letter addressed to?
The letter is from me, Tanya Bradley, to Dr. Jane Sargent.
And because the district was not in compliance within that 1-year timeline, what was required of the department?
The district was required to immediately implement the necessary actions to resolve all identified areas of noncompliance that remained on record.
And what was the result? What action did the department take because of the district's failure to be in compliance within that year?
The Office of Special Education reported to the Office of Accreditation the continued noncompliance and indicated that the district was being reported to the Office of Accreditation for immediate action under accreditation standard 23.3 and 2.5.
And what law or regulation requires the Department of Education to implement sanctions for JPS's failure to be in compliance?
That would be IDEA regulations at 34 CFR 300.600, which again is the state monitoring enforcement requirements.
Please look at Exhibit C11 and explain to the Commission what that
is. Exhibit C11 is the Mississippi Department of Education Program Improvement Monitoring process, and basically this is a description of the program improvement monitoring that describes a focused monitoring process used by the Office of Special Education. This process mirrors the Federal Office of Special Education's continuous improvement monitoring process, and it is a process that is focused on positive outcomes for children with disabilities and their families, and it is focused on, it's an outcomes-based or results-oriented focused monitoring process.